Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to talk about population, and we're going to look at some population pyramids. And I just want you to know that since starting kind of researching and looking at this class, I love looking at population pyramids. I think it's so interesting and it can tell you a lot about a country or a region. So just some kind of background information before we look at the population pyramids. Number one, before the 19th century, human population grew really slow. It took us from the start of human civilization to 1800 to reach 1 billion people. So, it took us all that time to reach 1 billion people. And then suddenly, in the last 200 years, 220 years actually, the population has just exploded. And we are around 7.4 billion people today. So, and there is a prediction that we will be near 11 billion people by 2100. The question is, what can the Earth support? Can it really support 11 billion people? I don't know if the Earth can support 7 billion people. This is going to be a real interesting time with our population and how we choose to live our lives and what's happening with our world. So this, you can kind of see, here's where we hit the 1 billion kind of marker. And really over the course of the next 100 years, we added another, we were at 1.65 billion. So we didn't add a full billion people, and that for that whole 100 years. But by 1960, a lot happens between 1900 and 1960, because not only did we add our second billion people, but we added a third. So by 1960, from 1800 to 1960, we had tripled the world's population. And then from 1960 really to 1980, which is only a 20-year span, we suddenly, have hit another billion people. Okay, so the growth is pretty quickly. It's happening really quickly. So we hit 7 billion people. It was about 2013. We hit about 7 billion people. And now we're at 7.4. I remember when we hit 6 billion people, which was right around, 2000, maybe 2001, 2002. And to hit 7 billion people in 2013, we're now quickly adding billions of people, if that makes sense. So we're estimated to hit 9 billion people at 2040, 2060. So about every 20 years, you're looking at another billion people, which is pretty rapid population growth. So as geographers kind of look at numbers of population, there are some things they really focus on. And the first thing is the crude birth rate, the CBR. And that's the number of live births per year for each 1,000 people. So how many children are born per 1,000 births? And then the second thing is the total fertility rate, the TFR. This is the average number of children who would be born per woman of that group in a country, assuming every woman lived through their childbearing years. Now, when we talk about the TFR actually tells geographers and scientists a lot more than the birth rate. Okay, the total fertility rate is the number of children each woman has. So here in the United States, there's an average fertility rate of 1.4 children per woman. So I recognize that you can't have half a child, but because it's a statistic, some women have 3 children, some women have 5 children, some women have 0 children. So because of that, when you divide it down, it gives you a percentage. So it's 1.4 for here in the United States. So what geographers have discovered is the more educated women become, the more likely they are to work outside the home, the fewer children they have. So as a society's birth rates go down, or the total fertility rate goes down, what this tells us is that women in that country have become more educated. Women play a very important role in measuring a country's development and how many children they are having. So in most of the world, the TFR was higher in the past than it was today. So in parts of Europe before the 1800s, 6.2 children was kind of the average. And you needed more children to work the land. And you needed to have more children because so many of them died as infants and toddlers. And people didn't live that long. The average age of death was around 40 years. So me being someone in their 40s, I would be really close, could potentially be close to death if I had lived in the 1800s, or I would have made it past the actual age of death for most people. And for a woman, like if a woman could live through her childbearing years, she's more likely to live a longer life. Women, in the early part, prior to like 1900, really, more women died in childbirth than anything else. So I'll give you an example for myself. My first child, I actually had twins, so the children born I had two babies, and one of my daughters was in distress when she was born. So we had to have an emergency C-section. The cord was wrapped around her neck. Like labor wasn't developing, so I couldn't have them naturally. So because of that, I had an emergency C-section. If I had lived prior to 1900, most likely the babies, both of them, would have died during birth, and most likely I would have died during birth too, because the babies weren't going to come out. So because of that, I would have died, and so would have the babies. Okay, so I would have died, and so would them. So ask your parents. Ask them if you had any complication at birth. If you had lived, before 1900, chances are you would have been infant mortality rate. Or if your mother had any complications at birth, she would have probably died during childbirth. Or if you had any accidents or things happen in early childhood, like even if something like breaking your arm could have caused your death, because we didn't have antibiotics. We didn't have a way to set your bone, so it might have become infected. So ask them if you don't know. Hey, did anything happen to me during my early childhood or my birth that would have caused me to die before? It's just interesting to know kind of where you would fall in the statistic, I guess, if you had lived at a different time. Here's the total fertility rates for the country now. You can see most of the industrialized world, Canada, the United States, Brazil, most of Europe, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, are 0 to 2. Are very similar to the United States. Birth rates are down. Women are very educated in these parts of the world. They have fewer children. We don't need children to work the farm. And that's one of the reasons that people had a lot of children. But then if you look in some other areas, like if you look here in Africa, women still are bearing 6 to 8 children. And why is that? Okay, that says a lot about the country and how developed they are. So population increased. One of the most important factors in the increase in global population is the rise of life expectancy. Like I mentioned before, the average age of death in 1800 was 40. Okay, and basically life expectancy is the number of years the average person will live. And the most important factor, kind of increasing life expectancy, not everyone, you would be considered probably elderly at Fuller, but not everyone died at 40. A lot of people would have lived to 60 or 80. What caused the life expectancy to be so low was the infant mortality rate of how many children died in infancy and toddlerhood or even childhood death. So it's a good example in Massachusetts in the 1950s. The IMR was 130 per 1,000. Today it's 4. So 4 children die. And 4 honestly is high. With our technology, should 4 babies be dying? No. So because of the decrease in infant mortality, our average life expectancy has gone up significantly. So I like this map, and I want you to recognize some things here. So 80 plus is the green. So I want you to notice what's green. Pretty much all of the developed world is green, but I want you to notice the United States. We are in the 70 to 80 category, and why that is, okay? We kind of our life expectancy kind of falls and compares to not quite as developed as the United States is. The United States is one of the most developed countries in the world, and we do not have the best life expectancy. So what do these countries that do have the best life expectancy have that we don't? Canada, most of Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Argentina. Why is their life expectancy so much better than ours here in the United States? And I think there's a couple of really good examples. The number one is obesity. In the United States, more people and children are obese, and we are seeing a decrease in our life expectancy because so many people, especially children, are obese. And the second is our healthcare. We do not have, there's a lot of hype, especially in our political times, or kind of what's happening in our country, but we do not have the best healthcare in the world. Other countries around the world have much better healthcare than what we have here in the United States. We pay a lot of money for our healthcare, and yes, some people do have very good healthcare, but not everyone. And so that also is part of our life, why our life expectancy is lower than other developed countries that we would consider ourselves equal to. So, what helped the life expectancy increase? There's a couple of different things. And the first and kind of most important is better food production and nutrition. We made major agricultural advances. So now instead of using horses, we use tractors. There's mechanical food production, improvement of seeds, fertilizers, farming techniques improved, transporting products is more efficient. So in 1800, almost everyone is going to farm, and you grew a lot of what you ate. Okay. So what you can grow in your climate here in Northern Illinois is mostly what you ate, and you would pack or can stuff away for the winter. That's not the case today. Today, if we were to take a trip, and I wish we could take a trip to the grocery store, any grocery store. So when you go to any store that has food, even Target or Walmart or Schnucks or Woodman's, go to the grocery store and look around. What do you see in the produce? Okay. Right now it's the start of fall. So you should see a lot of like apples are coming into season. What's not in season right now? Strawberries. But can you find strawberries at the store? Yes, you can. Blueberries, raspberries, those things are not in season. Bananas are a tropical fruit. They can't be grown in Northern Illinois, but why do we have them? And part of that is because we can transport goods from far away now, because we have a huge system of transporting goods that wasn't around in the 1800s. So we can get better nutrition in a variety of different food that you can't get, you couldn't get in the 1800s. You couldn't even really get that even like 70 years ago. So I have a really interesting story. In our Christmas stocking when I was growing up, we'd always get an orange. And they don't know why we always got an orange. So finally I asked my mom. And my mom said, well, I don't know. We always got one in ours, so I thought I should put it in yours. And we had oranges at other times. It wasn't like the only time we had oranges. So I asked my grandma why she always gave my mom orange in her stocking. And so my grandma told me when they were kids, and my grandma was a child during the 1930s, that the only time they got to have an orange was at Christmas time. They would be in their Christmas stocking. It was a really big treat for her and her siblings. It was just not something that they had in their stores all year round. It was only really found in the store in the winter. The reason why: oranges are only in season in the winter. Okay, can you find oranges at the store right now? Or grapefruits? You sure can. Are they as delicious as they are in December and January? Maybe not, but you can still find them. So they only were in the markets. My grandma grew up in Northern Illinois in the wintertime. So it was a special, they were fairly expensive. So it was a special treat to have it. That's not the case now, because even from 70 years ago, 80 years ago, I guess almost 90 years ago, we have much better transporting of foods that we can, and things are grown in greenhouses and it can be shipped to the United States at any time. So, this is a big reason why our life expectancy is longer. It allowed people to work outside of farming. We have food security. Farm families became smaller. Not a lot of people are farming, and then smaller farms get consolidated up into bigger farms. And those people moved into different jobs into urban areas. So the next reason that life expectancy increased is advances in public sanitation. As an industrial countries grew, so did the problems. We talked about cholera a couple of weeks ago. The spread of cholera and other diseases is a major problem. Having rodents around that cause plague is a problem. So what cities have done is they created a public sewer system. People used to just dump their human waste into the streets. It would flow into the river, which was your drinking water. That's a problem, especially for young children who died significantly more than, if you could make it to the age of 10 in the 1800s, you probably would live to adulthood. If you can't but there's a lot of people who couldn't make it to the age of 10. So for children and the elderly, it was a problem. So they discovered that you should boil your water. And then eventually cities were able to offer clean water systems. because we pay taxes. And then created the Department of Public Sanitation where they're picking up trash. When you don't have trash laying around on your streets, you don't have rodents. Rodents carry a lot of diseases. So for much of history, garbage was just kind of everywhere. Not the case today. When we look around our city, we don't see garbage everywhere. I hope you don't see garbage everywhere. And when you have garbage in places, that's where you're going to see more rodents, and rodents bring diseases with them. And then finally, the improvement in healthcare. So the improvement of food production keeps people healthier. Vaccinations began to be developed. Antibiotics can help you if you have an infection. And that all boosts life expectancy. So before 1800, smallpox killed about 400,000 people each year. Now we're not even vaccinated for smallpox anymore because it was eradicated from Earth in 1977. So you have not had a smallpox vaccine. I actually haven't had a smallpox vaccination. But your parents, depending how old they are, your grandparents, they would have had a smallpox vaccination. And then antibiotics, penicillin was developed in the 1900s. So before that, like if you broke your arm, you could get an infection and die from that. Now everything is easily treated. You get a cut. So not this last summer or the summer before, my daughter was messing around doing cartwheels in our house and we had like a glass cabinet thing. She hit it and broke it, and it shattered all into her hand. To be perfectly honest, that probably would have killed her if we lived in the 1800s, because she had to take a course of antibiotics. They had to clean all the glass out. And I just don't know if that would have been possible prior to the 1900s. So the last thing is the terms of development, just so you kind of know. There's a lot of terms you have to know here to understand, like birth rate, death rate, total fertility rate. And on the test, the AP exam, they may give it to you like the name, or they may give it to you as the abbreviation. So these are abbreviations you're going to see. So less developed country, the LDC. So when you see LDC, it means less developed country. Those are countries that generally are poor. Their population is more into farming, versus a high income, which is a more developed country, which is an MDC. The United States would be considered an MDC. And then there's the middle income countries. There's a lot of middle income countries, but they don't really, when you see that, they'll call them middle income countries. So let's look at some population pyramids. Okay. So here's kind of the first one. And this is the United States. Here's the overall population. And then it's from the year 2017, just so you kind of have a understanding. This is the population in 2017. All of these are from 2017. So there's 2017 at the end. That is not part of the population. So the first thing I want you to look at is the population pyramid. Let me just give you a little bit of information about population pyramids. They're divided by female and male. Okay. Pink is female, male is blue. Over here, you have ages, and they're in 5-year increments. Okay. So it starts with 0 to 5, and then, 10 to 4. 5 to 9, 10 to 14, and it kind of works its way up to 100 plus. Okay. So what I want you to do here is you're going to annotate. So the first thing is the generation known as the baby boomers were born from 1946 to 1964. So you need to figure out, this is 2017. So when were these people born? How old are they now? Okay. You got to do a little bit of math. In the 1950s, the largest age cohort in the U.S. were the ages of 0 to 4, which is 5 to 6, which is the baby boomers. 5.6 of them were boys and 5.3 were girls. You need to annotate where those people are on the pyramid now. Okay, so you have to do a little math. Where do they fall now? And you can use 2020. It will generally give you the same, you'll get in the same areas. And annotate the kind of the areas that would be considered baby boomers. Okay, so you could just insert like an arrow and put BB for baby boomer. Okay, and then the next one is Generation X. I myself am a Gen Xer. We were born from 1965 to 1979. Annotate that age group. Okay, so again, put a little arrow in for those and put Gen X. GX is fine. And then the final is the millennials. They were born from 1980 to 2000. Annotate this group in the pyramid. So then where do these groups fall in? And look and see, what's the population of those groups. So that's your first thing you're going to work on. Then you might need to look at the annotation. So you might need to go a little bit back and forth. In which groups did you see population bulges? Annotate that. And what might the account for them? So explain why you think there's bulges. Think about what's happening in history. Okay, when you see bulges in the pyramid, something is happening. What is it? Okay. Population pyramids tell you a lot of information, actually. So then we're going to look at Burkina Faso. And I just want you to notice, too, this is the United States population pyramid. The United States population is pretty straight, right? So each generation, there's some bulges, but it's pretty equal. Compare that to Burkina Faso. This is a pyramid, right? So our birth rates low or high in Burkina Faso. Notice what's happening down here. What does this tell you about Burkina Faso if the largest group is the 0 to 5? Okay, and explain how you determine that. So what does this pyramid tell you about Burkina Faso? I think the top of the pyramid is interesting as well. So like 80 to 85, there's virtually no one. Why are people dying in Burkina Faso? Contrast that number of the elderly people in Burkina Faso to the elderly people in the United States. Okay. Why is there such a drastic difference between the two? Explain your answer. Okay. So a little bit more about Burkina Faso with LDC, lower developed country, more developed country. Okay. You may need to go back and look at some of those abbreviations if you can't remember. All right. Then we're going to look at Mexico. So you have some questions about Mexico, comparing it to Burkina Faso. Okay. What does this pyramid tell you about it? Here's China's, and China's is interesting, okay? And remember, China, too, they have something called the one-child policy. So they are because they needed to curb their population, they only allow people to have one child. So what does that done to their population? So keep that in mind, too, and compare theirs to Mexico and Burkina Faso. Okay. And then the United Arab Emirates, here's their population. Obviously, I hope you're noticing right away this problem with the males. What is this? Why do you think this is here? All right. Okay. If you read the questions, you'll get your answers, I think. And then finally, you're going to look at the 5 countries. Which 2 countries have the largest need in the present and near future for education? Explain your answer. Okay. And then life expectancy questions. Okay. Healthcare questions. Dependency rate. If you don't know what dependency rate is, look it up. Okay. All right. So you have a few more to kind of go through. Let me know what you think. If you need help, let me know. Feel free to email me. I hope you have a great day.